colleagues across the aisle have waged an all-out war on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm not sure if it's that they just hate one aspect of it, like diversity, or if it's the combination of all three.
So there's this September 5th, 2023 piece in Air and Space Force magazine, and it's titled in part, "Why Diversity Should Scare the Hell Out of Our Adversaries." And I've never seen the fear in someone's eye when they're confronted with diversity, but
I think part of this DEI stuff, insofar as we insert it in younger children, implies that if you're not of European ancestry, you're not going to do as well in this country.
Is it worth funding the DEI programs in the military? What good has it brought to the military? We have the biggest recruitment crisis that we've ever had. That is a fact. And I believe that the DEI programs and the politicization of our military is another big reason why.
It is no surprise that the same people complaining about DEI are the same people who complained about the Me Too movement, about Black Lives Matter, about the ERA, about the gay rights movement, and so much more. The fact that as soon as someone who is Black or gay has a disability earns a promotion, Republicans complain that they are unqualified and begin ranting about how diversity, equity, and inclusion is ruining the country. It's shameful, it's untrue, it's discriminatory, and we must not back down in our efforts to create a nation that respects all people. Might I add that the opposition is majority overwhelmingly white and male. There is not one woman on this panel, and I almost walked out just on the strength of that. But the only reason why I didn't is because that is a systemic issue here in Congress and often for people who come before this committee. And if you don't have one woman in a position of leadership and authority that should be there, then that is also a problem. But again, women, hundreds of women, the report detailed hundreds of women who experienced harassment with no recourse. For over a decade, the FDIC, under your leadership and your predecessors, ignored them. Chair Gruenberg, in November, in fact, not that long ago, you stated that the FDIC already has, quote, appropriate policies and procedures in place, unquote. Do you now agree, and this is a yes or no question, I'm serious, do you now agree that the policies and procedures in place have been a cataclysmic failure and an affront to the many women who have been harassed, pushed out of the FDIC, and forced to change their career goals and life trajectory?
They have failed, yes, Congresswoman.
Mr. Berry, Chapter 18 of the Project 2025 Manifesto is about the Department of Labor, and you are the author of that chapter, correct?
Lead author, yes. There's others too.
Yes, you are. I believe the American public should know exactly how you and the Republican majority that invited you to testify today want to sabotage the EEOC, rewrite the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and push all of us back to an era of Jim Crow racism. I'm shocked that my colleague across the aisle was in disbelief at our characterizations and assertions of racism and discrimination when even former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said the Republican side of the aisle looked like the most restrictive country club in America. We all know that Make America Great Again is about making America white only again. This Republican majority has demonstrated it's out of touch with the priorities of everyday people and has focused its effort on passing legislation and budgets to undermine DEI and entrench systemic discrimination against people of color, folks with disabilities, and other marginalized groups. Republicans sought to defund the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Education, which is essential to confronting the rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia impacting our students. Republicans voted to stop the hiring of DEI personnel in the military, despite evidence that it will improve military readiness. And Republicans consistently use harmful rhetoric at every opportunity to undermine the talent, knowledge, skills, and the training of professionals in every sector where DEI initiatives exist. And they often pervert, mischaracterize, and weaponize the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., despite the fact that his surviving children have repeatedly asked them to cease and desist from doing so. Now, President Biden signed a historic executive order on his first day in office to take a whole-of-government approach that embodies equity in the administration's work to ensure all people benefit, not just the wealthy and well-connected. Mr. Miller, the Office of Management and Budget plays an outsized role in implementing and overseeing the executive orders on equity. Can you explain why equity is an important part of performance goals for agencies?
Thank you, Congresswoman. And there was a phrase that you use that is central to explaining it is that government should work for all Americans. So one example of something that we are doing is around accessibility associated with government services. We have many government digital websites and services where it's hard for some people, including disabled individuals, to access those government services, and we're working to improve that. Our services aren't working if they're not serving all of America.
Very good. I agree. What is an example of how President Biden's executive order on equity has helped folks across the country?
Well, one of the things that we have done is to broaden and discussed in this hearing the way in which we are utilizing federal financial assistance to reach more broadly into communities, to improve performance of the dollars, to make sure that community-based organizations that might otherwise not have applied for federal funds are able to access those funds and better deliver because they're closer to those in their community. That means better results, that means more efficiency, and frankly, that means less waste on useless overhead.
Thank you. The executive order, this is truly a first of its kind. I'm proud to partner with Ranking Member Raskin on legislation to codify key aspects into law so that they will exist in perpetuity. The truth is that America needs DEI to disrupt systems of oppression that are active in every facet of our society. DEI initiatives are how we combat white supremacy, anti-Semitism, ableism, sexism, transphobia, and more. In the face of this opposition, I applaud those who are committed to doing this work, from college presidents, corporate executives, to community organizers and academic researchers, and to those who are against DEI. I would love to know really what you are so afraid of. What are you so threatened by? Thank you. I yield. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The work of the FDIC is paramount in supervising our banks, strengthening our financial system, finalizing important regulations like Community Reinvestment Act, Basel III, and in times of economic crisis, FDIC is even more important. It was just last year when folks in my district, the MA 7th, were constantly refreshing the agency's webpage to see if their money was safe after the failure of Silicon Valley Bank. The agency's mission is critical, and there is much work to do. I had initially planned to spend this time discussing regulations and requesting updates from Chair Grunberg on the timeline for finalizing rules that stabilize our financial system. However, after reading the recent report into the FDIC's workplace, the public needs answers on the toxic culture of racial discrimination and misogyny that has taken root and festered at the FDIC. Chair Grunberg, you have failed your staff, people of every walk of life, but especially women employees who have brought their knowledge and their skills to serve at the FDIC, and you have failed the American public, who relies on the agency to work productively and to put forth policies that protect consumers from bank malfeasance. Now, I have to just consider the source here when it comes to some of the outrage from my colleagues across the aisle, because these are the same people who seek to actively defund diversity, equity, and inclusion, who denied and undermined the Me Too movement, who voted against the Violence Against Women reauthorization, and who don't want to support finally passing the Equal Rights Amendment. And that is why I am truly disgusted by the fact that you have created an opportunity for Republicans who did all of those things to advance their anti-regulation agenda and to use survivors, which I am one, of abuse as political pawns. Small, ashamed, traumatized, humiliated, alone. These are just a few of the words to describe the intense feelings of sexual harassment and what survivors endure. According to the FDIC's own reporting, more than 80% of harassment complaints resulted in zero discipline. And when there were repercussions, not a single one resulted in removal, reductions in grade or pay, or any discipline more serious than a temporary suspension. I am so tired of white men failing up. This lack of accountability is a shameful, inadequate, and deeply unsatisfactory, and it is re-traumatizing. Chair Grunberg, can you guarantee right now no employee at the FDIC will face any form of intimidation or retaliation for reporting an incident of sexual harassment regardless of confidentiality agreements?
That's our goal, Congresswoman. Yes, the answer to that is yes.
It is shameful that through your inadequate leadership at the helm of this agency that you have fueled calls for your resignation from the political opportunists across this aisle and jeopardized critical regulations pending finalization at your agency. Personally, I do not have confidence that you can continue to lead in this role because there is a deficit of trust and your credibility has been undermined to lead the FDIC through the changes it needs to make to affirm the dignity of the survivors of harassment, discrimination, and abuse at your agency. Thank you, and I yield. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. You know, although the subject matter of today's hearing is to be expected, it certainly makes it no less offensive or frightening. My Republican colleagues very often like to quote Dr. King, I don't know, maybe for some faux civil rights credibility or to pervert his words to suit your extremist needs, while working actively to undermine his legislative legacy. On the first page of Chapter 18, Project 2025 complains about how the Biden administration has been fighting for racial equity. On the next page, it calls for eliminating data collection on race and ethnicity in employment. On the page after that, it calls for rescinding an executive order signed in 1965 that prohibits discrimination in hiring by contractors. Mr. Berry, do these terrible ideas sound familiar?
They're great ideas.
These terrible ideas sound familiar? Of course they do. You came up with them. Mr. Berry, I find it shameful to advance a vision attacking the very policies and agencies that have helped Black Americans secure jobs, earn a living, and provide for our families. This Project 2025 plan is policy violence, plain and simple. Its authors have placed such a large target on the EOC because of the incredible work the EOC is doing today. Last year alone, the agency filed more than 27,000 charges of race-based discrimination. These workers and their families have a pathway to justice, accountability, and healing because of the policies and regulations that Project 2025 is trying to get rid of. Ms. Wiley, how would workers be harmed by Project 2025's commitment to undermining crucial protections that are enforced by EOC and other federal agencies?
Well, essentially, it guts the ability to both be able to have the rights and have enforcement and protection of the rights that we already have, and we've been seeing improvements and advancements when we have been enforcing them. And I'm also deeply concerned with any suggestion that we should not be collecting data or that labor rights, the rights to organize, which has been so important for workers across race, including white men, to ensure that they're getting fair wages and safe working conditions. All of these are actually in that chapter, and they threaten our workplaces for people who are white, for people of color, for people of all backgrounds in this country. And I think that's why we all need to be concerned, because it really is about all of us.
That's right. They threaten our workplaces for every person who calls this country home. EOC offers essential protections that create workplaces where all of us can thrive, but Project 2025 aspires to be the realization of a decades-long crusade by Republicans to strip away this key pillar of the Civil Rights Act. As a founding member of the Stop Project 2025 Task Force, I look forward to showing and telling the American people exactly who you are, Mr. Berry, along with your extremist friends. I urge my colleagues to join me in building the inclusive world we know to be possible, one in which everyone, is there something funny?
No.
I didn't think so. Nothing funny about this. And in honor of my departed mother and for my 15-year-old daughter, I will do everything possible to stop you from building the world that you were hell-bent on doing. I urge my colleagues to join me in building the inclusive world we know to be possible, one in which everyone can show up to work free from discrimination. Thank you. I yield back.